Marriage is a long-standing cultural institution, usually consisting of some form of agreement that results in a couple living and having kids together. This agreement commonly isn't left up to the individuals being married to decide. Historically, arranged marriages were the norm, largely because it was considered a bonding between two families rather than between merely two people. Even today, at least 50% of marriages worldwide are arranged. The idea of marriage as formalizing the love and bond between a couple is a relatively recent Western invention, as well as the custom of buying a ring to kick things off. However, these two broad types don't exhaust the cultural diversity of marriage customs. My prior use of the word agreement in relation to marriage doesn't always hold between parties. Bride kidnapping, where a man abducts a woman for marriage without consent, is contemporarily practiced in Caucasus, African, and Central Asian regions. In Kyrgyzstan, a country bordering China and Kazakhstan, at least half of rural marriages are between abductor and abductee. What makes this statistic even more striking is that bride kidnapping is illegal in Kyrgyzstan. Illegality has never been a guarantee of behavioral change. Take prohibition or the drug war as an example. But there's something particularly difficult about prohibiting entrenched cultural practices, as opposed to less entrenched activities. Cultures get stuck in their own inertia, their own way of viewing the world, making external restrictions on their internal dynamics less likely to be successful. Another reason prohibitions of cultural customs fail to work is because the enforcers are composed of people who embody the values and customs of their culture, not necessarily the laws. I bring all this up in relation to bride kidnapping because of the manifest social costs the practice creates. Its effects on the mental health of the women are substantial, resulting in a wide array of consequences, from the extremes of suicide to the Stockholm syndrome they cultivate in order to not kill themselves. So, what maintains its practice? As touched on before, cultural inertia plays a large role. Once culture is socialized into them, they think using its norms, operate within its spaces, define using its definitions. The ideology is embodied by the group, and the individual develops, learns, matures as a part of that group. Changing what is acceptable in society requires changing this socialization, this historical conditioning, which is difficult. It's even more difficult to change the minds of those who are benefited by the practice, those experiencing none of the costs while receiving all of the benefits. Think about slave owners and their human property, about the board of directors of a company deciding to outsource jobs, about any situation in which the benefits accrue to individuals who experience none of the costs. Kyrgyzstani men have no incentive to change until they learn empathy for those experiencing the costs, until their surrounding community condemns the practice and condemns them for participating in it. If norms originate through invention and are imposed by a group, a popular uprising against this group by another is the only way to spark substantive change. Our susceptibility to the influences of a group is evolutionarily ancient. Someone is more likely to spread offspring if they cooperate well with other people. Adaptively speaking, those individual psychologies which didn't conform to their surrounding ideology were likely ostracized and stigmatized, resulting in those people having less offspring. Conversely, those groups that were unanimous and focused were likely to result in more offspring. Being on the same page about how to act, how to come to truth, about what's acceptable to believe is crucial for a society. One's ideology structures one's thoughts with such a fluency that its influence isn't felt, and much of this was a benefit to the stability of groups in the past. As a little aside, if you're interested in learning more about the evolutionary approach to human psychology, I've linked a great intro to the topic in the description. Now, what does all this have to do with climate change? Well, over the past 200 years, the world has seen rapid industrialization and capitalism result in the greatest gains to material well-being in history. Poverty, defined as living on less than $2 a day, has decreased from 94% of the world's population in 1820 to around only 10% in 2015. Medicine has also seen great advances in this time period, including a large decline in infant and maternal mortality, though the US has seen rises in its maternal mortality rate in recent years. For more information, check these articles out. Regarding the general global progress that's been made since the Industrial Revolution, Steven Pinker's Enlightenment Now works as a good summary. Coincident with the progress that's been made, with the surplus that's so available, Western citizens have become accustomed to this form of social organization and its daily practices. Its ideology has become entrenched, making changing our practices difficult. This is a problem because also coincident with industrialization and global capitalism has been rising carbon emissions, the degradation of our natural environment, and the exploitation of natural resources. The severity of our ecological impact was at first small, but with an increasingly industrialized, connected, consuming world, the environment is at a point where we have to change our approach. We have to change our economy of overconsumption and fossil fuels, or else the effects on human life around the world will be tragic, irreversible, and destabilizing. The threats posed by global warming, from rising sea levels to desertification, the threats posed by plastics and waste, like microplastics in food and toxic waste in our oceans, weren't serious for a century because we simply weren't causing global changes. Now, our global world is creating global problems, requiring global solutions with global enforcement. If we don't change our system, our society's already precarious position will be tipped toward catastrophe. The thing is, though, many Westerners are stuck in this capitalist fossil fuel surplus ideology, probably because while they reap the majority of the benefits, they aren't having to pay most of the costs. A recent report by German Watch, a nonprofit think tank, provided an index of the countries most affected by climate disasters. Of the top 10 listed, none are Western countries. Further, air pollution, caused by fossil fuels, kills 4.2 million people a year, with basically none of these deaths occurring in Western countries. Putting this number in perspective, the combined deaths from the nuclear bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima are estimated at the relatively small 200,000, a mere fifth of those killed every year by air pollution. Regarding sea level rise, while the West will be affected, it'll be developing countries which will be most harmed, with the country of Bangladesh being a prime example. Already suffering from sea level rise, with even more increases, it's likely that there will be millions of climate refugees needing to find a place to live. If we thought the Syrian refugee crisis, or refugees from Latin America, was a problem, we are blissfully ignorant to the future problems we'll face because of our current practices. The resistance to these facts and projections demonstrates that the lack of action on the part of the West, particularly America, isn't just because of ignorance. Ignorance goes away in the face of good reasoning. It's also the result of our legitimizing ideology of neoliberalism and the influence of political donors who get rich off fossil fuels shamelessly lobbying for their interests. People don't want to have to change their practices, and the elites benefiting from the system have the monetary influence to keep things as they are. On the more general ideological side, recent data by Gallup demonstrates that climate awareness is divided along partisan lines. Where 1 in 10 Democrats believe that global warming's seriousness is exaggerated, more than 6 in 10 Republicans do. This isn't to say that the issue is entirely partisan. There is some bipartisan agreement about it occurring, but one of the best predictors for whether someone in the West believes in climate change is their political party. With Republicans being the party of conservatism and unbridled neoliberalism, this divide is to be expected. They're much more entrenched in traditional American ideology. So, with an economy that's based on fossil fuels, a culture of consumption, a population not experiencing much of the negative effects, and a class of people benefiting from keeping things as they are, the only shot we have at promoting change is a popular movement against these practices and interests. Our general tendency to keep things as they are, to not want to change, must be set aside to deal with the impending crisis. Much like Kyrgyzstani males must make the decision to be empathic, to change their practices to promote the well-being of the people in their society. The West must do the same for the well-being of the world's people. If we wish to act in a way respectful of our professed commitment to human rights, if we actually believe in our democratic values and our principles of human equality and freedom, there isn't much else we can do.